What is going on, guys? We are back in the mix for part 2 of BabyRuthless review. First off, I want to say that I love that name. I think it's fantastic. But I want to review this last hand. So if you haven't seen part 1, I would go back to part 1 and just watch the last hand. I did some commentary on what I think should happen. But I also texted Chris Fitch about this hand because I think it's an interesting spot. Not just with the blockers, but with which cards we pair. So originally I thought that at some point we should consider check raising river. We pair an ace, so I was under the impression that our opponent's draw was pretty rough. We'll rewatch this hand really quick and then go from there. Let's see here, this one. Let's see here. There we go. One. Sorry, my replayer was being a little bit funny there. So let's start with the open here. The cutoff, Jubald raises, Flaherty calls, small blind we call with 2-3-5. Totally standard. This is good. It goes 2-2-1. Flaherty checks, we check, Jubald bets. Flaherty calls, and now we decide to check raise. I think this is a little bit too much. I think we should just go ahead and check call in the 2-2-1 spot. I also think theoretically you could lead and get the player behind you to raise to try to isolate. We don't love being out of position any which way, but still, if we think that this player behind might raise to isolate us and get Flaherty out of the hand, I think that might be an added bonus too with a inferior draw. But I most likely would just go ahead and go for the check call here, even with a wheel draw. Now, I would notice that we've thrown away a 9 and an 8. The jack isn't as significant. Discard 1, so it goes 2-1-1, and then we catch a deuce. So obviously a deuce is a pretty significant card in this game because it's one of the lowest ones we can catch. But the problem here is that we're still out of position, and we don't want to get raised in the spot if we bet, because we're still drawing anyways. It's not like we have a pat hand behind us or a hand that we can optionally pat. So I think that what we want to do in this spot is just go ahead and check. And then if it checks through, it's not necessarily a big deal. And if Jubald bets, then we can just go ahead and check call. Sometimes it's going to go check, check, bet, raise. And now we're in kind of a really tricky situation. But I don't think we can just bet here unimproved 100%. I think even with the fact that we've thrown away an 8, a 9, a deuce, I think it's just going to be a little bit too much. So I would like to see a check here, I believe. We bet. We do get raised by Jubald. We do call, and then we pair aces on the river. And my initial argument is I thought we would, go for a occasional check raise here sometimes. I said like this one might be a good candidate to check raise just because I think my opponent here has probably a rough draw. So you could theoretically go with a lead here. You could theoretically go with a check raise. I mean, sometimes here you can just check and give up. But what I did was I did text Chris for this hand to see what his response was, and I figured I'd read it here. In his response is, in theory, we should check this river spot very often, I believe. So check raise at some frequency makes some sense. And what I like to kind of do occasionally in some of these situations is, pick one of the aces, right? If you're going to check raise with one, like maybe you check raise a third of the time you pair aces in this situation. And if that's the case, then, pick a suit or something like that. That's the way that I go about it. It might not be exactly GTO, but it's kind of better than nothing. And he continues, sort of expensive, but we may want to hero call anyways. So it may be maybe only it's one extra bet. Meaning sometimes here if our opponent's snowing, then maybe we just want to check call with the aces. Because my initial thought in the original video is that if our opponent, like how often does our opponent fold if we decide to check raise? But also I think too, if our opponent's snowing, we can just check call with aces anyways. It really just depends, like, do we think our opponent's value betting with an 8 or not? And sorry, I should have just let the action run out. So it goes check, bet, and we snap fold. And I think I wouldn't necessarily snap fold in this situation. I think just because, you know, sometimes we miss a draw, we should definitely still think about how to perceive and how to, you know, keep, like, is there an opportunity here to check raise to bluff? Is there an opportunity to lead? Is there an opportunity to hero call? So sometimes it's very easy when we miss draws like that to just muck them. But at the same time, too, I also think it is a very important thing to consider what our best options are. And sometimes, you know, again, this just comes with experience, because like part of me wants to just check raise bluff, but also I think there's part of me that when I see a check raise bluff there, I just know it doesn't work very much. And now it's kind of an expensive check raise bluff. So, you know, I have more success, I think, with just hero calling in general. It's like one extra bet. You know, I block a lot of his good hands. If he's not value betting thin enough, I would say that's probably a good candidate to do it with too. So that's where we left off the last video, but I wanted to also add a few thoughts. Also a few thoughts from Chris. And we'll just keep it going, I guess. Got about 10 more minutes left in the video. So here we go. 2, 4, 5, 8 here in triple draw. This is, yeah, most likely ditch an 8. If it gets 3-bet here, I think it's a little bit tricky out of position without an ace in our hand. I'm probably just going to fold. It does get 3-bet. Yeah, I like the fold here. I think the fold is correct. We can skip a little bit forward and see how it plays out. Last round's going to go pat 1-1. And don't really learn anything about the ranges. So sometimes too, like obviously it's important to see what your opponents and what their ranges look like. So don't really pick up anything here. Nice draw on the button here with a 3-card wheel with an ace. So this will get played. Yep, good 3-bet. And we get snap 4-bet. So I would love to get to showdown just to see what this is interesting too. We get 4-bet out of position here and our opponent takes 2. So that I think is important to notice, especially about like the previous hand. I played a previous in one of the series I did with, or the Deuce to 7 series I did with Chris, the video review so far. We were talking about what our opponent decides to bluff with sometimes, what they show down with, and actions they take like this. It's very, very, very important to notice it. So notice like when your opponent does something like that and his tendencies, what they're going to show down with. So obviously he checks, we improve to a wheel draw, easy bet button, takes 2 again. Yeah, this is just going to be, we'll see how this one plays out, because obviously when he checks 2, you're going to bet in a 2-1 spot. And he calls, and now if he draws, this is a spot where we're just going to have to pat the 9-5. We have, I believe, a little bit more equity with the 9-5 versus drawing, unless he pats in position, which he does not. So I think what we're doing here is I think we're giving up a little bit too much equity by breaking the 9. I'll run this. I'm going to run this scenario, I think, really quick. I'm going to pause it and see what the difference is between like having a wheel draw versus, we'll say, like a rough. We'll say like, I'm trying to think what the average hand looks like here, but against the 4-bet, my guess is it's probably some sort of like maybe a 6 draw, even though we still have a better draw, and we are in position. So I'm going to pause it real quick and see what it is. All right, I ran the math really quick in this situation, and being in position. One second. So being in position here with a wheel draw and a 9, we have against a, we'll say, I gave our opponent about a 6 draw range, given the fact that he 4-bet out of position. My guess is that his 3 cards should be pretty good. So something like ace deuce 3 or 3 to a wheel. Also, I mean, he could have a 7, but I think that's it doesn't matter as much, because if we keep the 9-5 here in this situation, it doesn't matter if he has a 6 draw or 7 draw. If he makes a 9, he still loses. So in this position with your 9, you have about 65% equity if you pat your hand. If you draw against the person drawing in this situation, you have roughly about 53%. So I have to imagine that we don't make up a 12% difference. I actually don't even know what I have to do some sort of math on this, but I'm trying to think of what the number is, the difference is. Maybe it'd be 3%, maybe it'd be 4%. I'm not quite sure. 3%, 5%. I don't think it's 10%, but it might be something around 2 to 5% where our equity advantage by padding versus breaking for action is good enough to consider it. But I think 12% is just way off. So in this situation, I think it's a mistake. I think it's definitely a mistake to break the 9. I would have kept the 9 in position. And sometimes we just have to, just pat and just realize our equity. There's not much we can do in that situation. But this is one of those spots. So continue. We check back when we catch the jack, which I also think is correct. I don't think we value bet a jack here. And our opponent, unfortunately, shows up with a what would have been a worse 9. And it is, again, let's notice here that he 3-bet with no deuce, no ace in his hand out of position under the gun. This is probably just, my guess is it just might be a little bit too small for him. This game, just, it could be, or he just is learning, but it's just my observation. All right, deuce to 7 Raz. So obviously, deuce to 7 portion of it is a little bit different than ace to 5. 7, 5, 4, 3, 2 is the best low hand, but I always say like it's going to be relative given the boards. So in this first hand here, obviously you start with a deuce and a 7 up, but basically to any action, we're just going to fold a face card. And a lot of the cards that you actually needed were over here, plus we're facing a 2-bet. So easy give up. We're just going to run it through a little bit. We're not playing a king here. Let's go to the next one. I did not see this. Yeah, ace jack 8. Easy give up. King jack 9, nothing there. May I go too far? I don't think so. I just want to. No, that didn't. Okay. All right, ace jack 9, bring in. Obviously not defending this one either. Unfortunately, we're just not playing any right now, but sometimes that's the way. It's not, I mean, when you get dealt bad hands, your best defensive weapon is all you can do is just fold anyway, so it's kind of the name of the game. Did we get stuck here? Oh, there we go. All right, so deuce through jack in the spot. We'll see how the action goes, but obviously this, if folded to, it becomes an easy steal. I think if CT opens here, we're probably just folding the jack. If Flurry opens with a 10, we're probably still folding. I expect Flurry to have, I would say, a tighter range here, but this is close. I actually think there's some merit here to playing here with 2 wheel cards and a deuce 3, just because also your board's going to run out pretty good pretty often. And he's going to have a tough time playing against you. So we'll just see how this one plays out. Easy open, so not much really there to do. Okay, limit them a high or better. Obviously, there's always a high. Sometimes there's a low. The low qualifies 8 or better. So 3 cards on the board, 2 in your hand, unpaired. Always looking for an ace. I see that folded. Just want to go back to the fold, but I'm pretty sure it's 5, 6, 6, 9. Yeah, fold here in the cutoff, pretty easy, even if it was double suited. This one's just to go up. Kind of funny, those 2 hands ran up against each other. Deuce, deuce, king, jack. Yeah, the big blind. This is a hand that's pretty much unplayable all the time. Trying to think if this is going to fall somewhere in like probably the bottom 5% or so hands, even though we flop just pure. Sorry, I didn't realize that I had pressed stop, so just run this one out. My replayer froze. Hold on one sec. There we go. We're back. Kind of surprised actually it went check on this river with both of these hands. Obviously at this point they're trying to get their hands to showdown, but top two on this board, I think someone probably needs to bet somewhere. Jack 3, 4, 7. We can play this hand in the small blind versus the big blind, but that's most likely it. Yeah, against any other position, this is just going to go right in the muck. Two big hands on that board. Oh, all right here. All right. Beautiful looking hand here. This is always going to be 3-bet. Again, in this ace wheel with the 2 high card double suited combination. This is probably like top 5% hand here. Say like one of the best hands you get besides aces. And we get a flop that's not necessarily like, I mean, the structure of the flop I think is favorable to our range too. So I think we can bet here at a high percentage for sure. Especially we have not low. Just because we don't have any spades though. I mean, like this is a good hand I think to consider kind of semi bluffing, just because if our opponents have like mediocre hot hands, they kind of have to fold too. I mean, sometimes we're going to run into a flush and get check raised, but I also think betting here is superior. And yeah, get it through. Nice. And the 4, 6, 9, 8. Yeah, that's a fold from that position as well. It looks like the video actually here is going to end in a minute. So I'll pause it. And this was a little bit shorter, just because I didn't like quite know how many hands were going to be played, etc. But just kind of looking, I would say, at that, the only hand that really stood out for me was I think the 9 in position when we had it. Those are just I would say spots that we have to get experience with. I actually played one. I can't remember if it was today or yesterday, where I was in a 1-1 spot and I had 10-7 out of position, and I ended up checking and not padding and breaking it again to a hand that to a player who had checked behind. And it's just one of those spots where, you know, even if you have a wheel draw or you have the best draw possible, if your opponent has a draw, you gain something like an extra 10% equity by having a 10 in that spot. And this was a deuce hand. This was an ace to 5 hand. So it's very similar in the ace to 5 spots where you have a 9. And if your opponent's still drawing there, you're something like a 2/3 favorite. So I would just study up a little bit on the math if possible. But besides that, I'd say, yeah, definitely moving in the right direction. No, I would say no super big mistakes with respect to ranges pre-flop, or, you know, limping in some of the games where usually we just want to take a raise or fold approach. So yeah, I want to thank BabyRuthless for sending in the video. And again, if anyone else wants some commentary, please send in the video. I'm more than happy to do this kind of stuff. If I'm ever in a pickle, I have no problem reaching out to some of my friends for some further answers to it, extra videos too, because again, like I'm always learning at the same time. And again, if you like what you see, please like, subscribe, comments or questions below. Would love to hear them. That'd be fantastic. And until then, I wish everyone well. Play well at the tables. Good luck. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.